Let us begin our journey tonight, not in the world of ancient battles or distant galaxies, but in the quiet, shadowy world of secrets and whispers. This is the story of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, an institution that has long stood as a great pillar of American national security. Founded in the year 1908, this powerful agency plays an absolutely critical role in the complex and often invisible world of counterintelligence, combating terrorism, and protecting the nation against the espionage of its foreign adversaries. While the FBI has faced numerous and difficult challenges over its long and storied history, its absolute darkest moment, its most profound crisis, occurred in the late 20th century. And this crisis came not from an external enemy, but from deep within its own trusted ranks. It was caused by one of its own agents, a man named Robert Hanssen, who would go on to commit what is widely and tragically regarded as the single worst intelligence disaster in all of FBI history. For over 2 long decades, Hanssen methodically and ruthlessly betrayed the United States by selling its most sensitive and classified information to the Soviet Union, and later, to Russia. His treachery was not just an isolated act of espionage, it was a deep and catastrophic wound, one that caused a terrible cascade of devastating consequences that compromised the nation's most sensitive operations, that directly endangered the lives of brave agents and invaluable informants, and that left a deep and indelible stain on the FBI's own reputation for integrity and competence. This catastrophic breach of security raised serious and deeply troubling questions about the FBI's internal security measures, about the vulnerabilities that exist within even the most trusted and powerful institutions, and about the complex and often dark motivations that can drive an individual to betray their own country. To truly understand the immense magnitude of Hanssen's betrayal, we must first transport ourselves back in time, to the broader and deeply tense context of American intelligence operations during the Cold War. This period, which stretched from the late 1940s all the way through the late 1980s, was defined by an intense and all-encompassing rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. This was a war that was fought not on traditional battlefields, but in the shadows, in the quiet back alleys of great cities and in the silent hum of listening posts. Both of these great nations invested heavily in the dark arts of espionage, seeking to gain any possible strategic advantage, and often relying on a complex and dangerous game of double agents, of covert operations, and of advanced surveillance technology to try and outmaneuver each other. By the 1970s and 1980s, the FBI was tasked with the crucial and incredibly difficult mission of protecting the United States against all foreign intelligence operations on its own domestic soil. This included the daunting tasks of identifying and neutralizing the Soviet spies who were operating within the country. While the CIA focused on international operations, the FBI handled the vital work of counterintelligence within the borders of the United States. This division of labor made the FBI's role in counterespionage absolutely vital to the nation's security. Can you picture the scene? The agency was responsible for the constant and careful monitoring of the Soviet embassies, which were known to be hotbeds of espionage activity. They worked to intercept coded communications, and they attempted to recruit their own double agents to infiltrate the foreign intelligence networks. However, despite all of their successes, the FBI was far from invulnerable. The agency's own internal security measures, which were designed to detect these kinds of insider threats, were, as we will come to see, not nearly as robust as they needed to be. And this hidden weakness, this vulnerability, created a dangerous and unseen opportunity for individuals like Robert Hanssen, an opportunity for him to exploit his position of immense trust for his own personal gain. His shocking and long-running actions would ultimately highlight the truly devastating consequences of these hidden institutional vulnerabilities, and would force the entire American intelligence community to confront its greatest failure. The great chess match in the shadows was being played for the highest of stakes, but one of the most important pieces on the board was secretly working for the other side. Robert Philip Hanssen, the man at the very center of the worst intelligence disaster in the long history of the FBI, lived a life of stark and profound contrasts. Outwardly, he was a devoted husband, a loving father of 6 children, and an accomplished, respected FBI agent. But behind this carefully constructed facade of suburban piety was a man who would betray his country and his colleagues in one of the most damaging and long-running acts of espionage ever recorded. To understand how he became this great traitor, we must first look into his background, his career, and the quiet, personal struggles that would provide the fertile ground for his treachery. Robert Hanssen was born on April 18, 1944, in the great city of Chicago, Illinois, to a middle-class family. His father, Howard Hanssen, was a police officer, a man who reportedly had a domineering and deeply critical personality. What is it like to grow up under the shadow of such a father? The accounts from Hanssen's early life suggest that his father's harsh and often belittling treatment affected him deeply, fostering a powerful and gnawing sense of inadequacy and a quiet, simmering resentment that would follow him all the way into his adult life. Academically, however, Hanssen excelled, particularly in the fields of science and mathematics. He graduated from Knox College in Illinois with a degree in chemistry and later went on to earn an MBA from the prestigious Northwestern University. It was while he was pursuing his education that Hanssen converted to Roman Catholicism and became a deeply and outwardly religious man, a characteristic that would later become a defining and disarming feature of his public persona. Before joining the FBI, Hanssen briefly worked for the Chicago Police Department, where he served in the department's intelligence unit. This role gave him his first real exposure to the world of surveillance and to the intricate techniques of counterintelligence. His time as a police officer, however, was destined to be short-lived, as he soon sought a more prestigious and powerful career in federal law enforcement. And so, in the year 1976, Robert Hanssen joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, marking the beginning of a promising new career in the world of counterintelligence. He was initially assigned to the FBI field office in Gary, Indiana, where he worked on white-collar crime cases. However, his sharp technical expertise and his keen analytical skills quickly set him apart from his peers, leading to his transfer to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and a new, more sensitive assignment. It was in Washington that Hanssen's career took a decisive turn toward the very world he would one day betray, the world of counterintelligence. He was entrusted with highly sensitive assignments, including cases that involved active Soviet espionage. Over the years, Hanssen gained access to some of the most highly classified information in the entire U.S. government, including intimate details about surveillance techniques, about American counterintelligence strategies, and, most devastatingly, about the true identities of American assets who were operating deep within the Soviet Union itself. His colleagues described him as intelligent, as methodical, and as incredibly detail-oriented. He earned a reputation for his strong work ethic and his remarkable technical proficiency, particularly in the new and burgeoning field of computer technology and encryption. These skills earned him assignments that required an immense level of trust, giving him even greater access to some of the FBI's most sensitive and important operations. And all the while, Hanssen carefully and meticulously cultivated an image of absolute moral integrity, an image that was deeply rooted in his devout Catholic faith and his conservative family values. He was an active and respected member of Opus Dei, a conservative Catholic organization, and he often spoke to his colleagues about the immense importance of faith and family. This carefully maintained facade, this mask of piety and patriotism, made him an incredibly unlikely suspect when the FBI, years later, would begin its desperate and frustrating search for a mole within its own ranks. On the surface, he was a man of deep faith, a loving family man, and a dedicated public servant. But beneath this placid surface, his personal struggles with financial insecurity and his deep-seated desire for intellectual superiority and a sense of power over those around him were beginning to fester, creating the dark and secret world that would lead him down the path of betrayal. The stage was now set for one of the most damaging acts of espionage in all of American history. Robert Hanssen's path into the world of espionage was not a sudden, impulsive decision, nor was it an act of desperate, last-minute desperation. It was a cold and calculated betrayal, a deliberate and conscious step across a moral event horizon, a line from which there could be no return. It was a decision driven by his long-simmering and deeply personal desires for financial gain, for a sense of intellectual superiority, and for a feeling of power over the very institutions he had sworn to protect. His decision to approach the Soviet Union and to sell his country's most sensitive and vital secrets was the beginning of a two-decade-long career of treachery, a career that would go on to compromise some of the United States' most critical intelligence operations. The year was 1979. Hanssen had been with the FBI for just 3 years, a young and ambitious agent with a promising future. Unlike so many other spies of the Cold War era, who were often carefully and painstakingly recruited, cultivated, and sometimes even blackmailed by foreign intelligence agents, Hanssen made the first move entirely on his own volition. He initiated the contact himself, a bold and incredibly risky move that powerfully demonstrated both his immense arrogance and his supreme, almost chilling, confidence in his own abilities to evade detection. He began by writing an anonymous letter to the GRU, the Soviet Union's powerful and formidable military intelligence agency. Can you imagine the scene? A quiet suburban home, late at night, the rest of his family asleep in their beds. An FBI agent, a man entrusted with the nation's most sensitive secrets, sits alone at a simple desk, carefully and methodically composing a letter that he knows will change the course of his life, and the lives of many others, forever. The only sound is the quiet scratch of his pen on the paper. In this first, fateful communication, Hanssen offered to sell highly classified U.S. government information to the Soviets. And to prove his immense value, to show them that he was not just some low-level crank or a potential double agent trying to set a trap, he included a devastating and irrefutable sample of the secrets he could provide. What was this first piece of information he sold? It was one of the most damaging and unforgivable things a counterintelligence agent could possibly betray: the true identities of 3 Soviet double agents who were secretly working for the United States from deep within the Soviet intelligence apparatus. These individuals were invaluable assets, providing the U.S. with a precious and irreplaceable window into the inner workings of their greatest adversary. This single act of betrayal, his very first, not only demonstrated Hanssen's willingness to sell out his country but also immediately and powerfully established his credibility and his immense value with his new Soviet handlers. The Soviets acted with a swift and brutal efficiency on this new information. The double agents were arrested, they were interrogated, and at least 2 of them were summarily executed. With this single letter, Robert Hanssen had effectively dismantled years of painstaking intelligence work and had personally signed the death warrants of men who had trusted in the protection of the United States. What were his true motivations for this terrible act? The historical record suggests that they were complex, deeply personal, and ultimately, profoundly selfish. Financial gain was certainly a significant and powerful factor. Hanssen was struggling to support his large and growing family on his modest government salary, and he deeply resented what he saw as his financial limitations compared to others around him. But his actions were also fueled by a deep and powerful sense of intellectual superiority. He viewed himself as being far more intelligent, more cunning, and more capable than his colleagues and his superiors at the FBI. His secret life as a spy provided him with a way to validate this arrogant and dangerous self-perception. He seemed to relish the idea of outsmarting both the FBI and the Soviet Union, seeing himself as a master manipulator, a puppeteer pulling the strings in a great and secret global game. And unlike some other famous spies of the era, who later claimed to be driven by deep political or ideological convictions, ideology seems to have played little to no role in his betrayal. His motivations were, at their very core, deeply personal and profoundly self-serving. He had crossed a line, a point of no return, and had stepped into a world of shadows from which he would never truly emerge. The ability of Robert Hanssen to live a completely divided life for over 2 decades is one of the most striking and deeply unsettling aspects of his entire story. He skillfully and meticulously balanced his roles as a devoted family man, a dedicated and seemingly patriotic FBI agent, and a covert operative for foreign intelligence agencies. He was a ghost in the machine of American counterintelligence, a man who walked the halls of power while secretly working to undermine them. To his colleagues at the FBI, he was a complex but ultimately trusted figure. He was known for his sharp intelligence, his methodical work ethic, and his deep and almost prescient technical expertise, particularly in the emerging and often confusing field of computer technology. Can you picture him? A tall, serious figure in a dark suit, often seen hunched over a computer terminal, his face illuminated by the green glow of the screen. He was seen as somewhat socially awkward, a serious and often dour man who rarely engaged in the casual camaraderie and the easy laughter of the office. He cultivated an image of intense moral integrity, an image that was deeply and powerfully rooted in his devout Catholic faith and his conservative family values. He was an active and highly respected member of Opus Dei, a conservative Catholic organization, and he would often speak to his colleagues about the immense importance of faith, of family, and of duty. This carefully maintained facade, this powerful mask of piety and patriotism, made him an incredibly unlikely suspect when the FBI, years later, would begin its desperate and frustrating search for a mole within its own ranks. He was the quiet expert, the reliable, if somewhat eccentric, family man. Who could possibly suspect him? At home, in the quiet, leafy suburbs of Virginia, he appeared to be the very model of a dedicated husband and father. He and his wife, Bonnie, had 6 children, and their life seemed to be a perfect picture of conventional, middle-class stability. They were regular churchgoers, and Hanssen was, by all outward appearances, a strict but loving father who was deeply involved in his children's lives and their religious education. But how can a man reconcile such a life of apparent moral rectitude, with the dark and treacherous secrets he carried? How can one kneel for communion on a Sunday morning, knowing that on a Saturday night, they have betrayed everything they claim to hold dear? The answer, it seems, lies in a remarkable and chilling ability to compartmentalize his life. He seemed to have built great, thick walls in his own mind, convincing himself that his espionage activities were somehow separate from his moral and his religious beliefs, allowing him to reconcile his deep and professed faith with his profound and ongoing betrayal. This incredible ability to compartmentalize also extended to his personal relationships, as he somehow managed to keep his wife and his 6 children completely in the dark about his secret, double life for over 20 long years. This quiet, unassuming family man, this serious and dedicated FBI agent, was at the same time one of the most valuable and destructive spies in all of American history. His betrayal was not just a series of isolated acts, it was a long and sustained career of deception, one that inflicted immense and irreparable damage on U.S. national security. As he rose through the ranks of the FBI, his access to even more sensitive and highly classified information grew. He was entrusted with some of the nation's most vital secrets, and he, in turn, systematically and ruthlessly sold those secrets to the Soviet Union and later, to Russia. The sheer scope of his espionage was truly staggering. It involved the compromise of countless sensitive operations, the exposure of advanced surveillance technologies, and, most tragically, the betrayal of human lives. His deep and intimate understanding of the FBI's own methods, its priorities, and its blind spots made him an extraordinarily valuable asset for the Soviets. He knew what the FBI was watching, he knew how they conducted their surveillance, and he knew which operations were active. This incredible insider knowledge allowed the Soviets to not only evade detection but to actively protect their own assets and even to exploit FBI operations for their own advantage. Throughout his long career of deception, Hanssen meticulously and masterfully balanced his two separate worlds, moving between them with a chilling and almost seamless ease. He was a man who lived in the shadows, a ghost in his own life, a quiet and unassuming figure who was, at the same time, at the very center of a great and devastating storm of betrayal. The making of this FBI agent was also, tragically, the making of a master spy, a man who would go on to become a powerful and enduring symbol of the immense dangers of the insider threat and the profound and often heartbreaking fragility of trust. The remarkable and terrifying success of Robert Hanssen as a spy can be largely attributed to his meticulous and almost obsessive planning, and his incredibly cautious approach to the very craft of espionage. He was not a reckless or flamboyant operative, driven by passion or impulse. He was a methodical and disciplined professional who understood, with the keen eye of an insider, the immense risks involved in his treacherous activities. He took the most extreme and carefully considered measures to protect his identity and to avoid detection, creating a sophisticated system of communication and exchange that was, for a very long time, almost completely foolproof. His espionage was not just a series of transactions, it was a dark and intricate art form that he worked to perfect over the course of 2 decades. At the very heart of his operational security, his personal doctrine of survival, was his strict and unwavering insistence on using dead drops. What is a dead drop? It is a covert and indirect method of exchanging information, a timeless technique in the world of spies that allows 2 parties to pass materials to one another without ever having to meet face to face, without ever having to even see each other. Can you picture it? A quiet, unassuming public park in the suburbs of Virginia, late on a cold night. The world is asleep. Hanssen, a man who by day is a husband, a father, and a protector of American secrets, would drive to this quiet spot. He would carefully place a package of highly classified documents, often sealed in a nondescript plastic bag to protect them from the elements, in a predetermined and hidden location. This location, known as the signal site, was chosen with incredible care. Perhaps it was a spot beneath a wooden footbridge or tucked away inside the hollow of an old tree. He would then leave a small, almost invisible signal, like a single piece of adhesive tape placed on a nearby signpost, a quiet message to his handlers that the package was ready for collection. In return, the Soviets, and later the Russians, would leave his cash payments or his diamonds in a completely separate and equally innocuous dead drop location. This indirect method, this reliance on the silent and anonymous exchange of secrets in the shadows, minimized the risk of surveillance and allowed Hanssen to remain a complete and total ghost, a phantom who was known to his handlers only by his code name. His communication methods were just as sophisticated and just as cautious. Hanssen and his Soviet handlers communicated through a complex and evolving system of coded messages. He adopted a series of aliases, or code names, such as the famous Ramon Garcia, to ensure that his real identity was never revealed, not even to the very people who were paying him for his betrayal. He would use encrypted notes and a series of pre-agreed-upon phrases and dates to confirm the locations of his dead drops and the safe delivery of his payments. These multiple layers of security, this almost obsessive attention to the smallest of details, added to the complexity of his espionage network, making it nearly impossible for the FBI, his own employer, to trace his activities back to him. And what gave him his greatest and most terrifying advantage? It was his own deep and intimate knowledge of the FBI's own methods, its procedures, and its vulnerabilities. As a highly trained and experienced counterintelligence agent himself, he knew exactly what to do to avoid raising suspicion. He understood the FBI's surveillance techniques from the inside out. He knew what kind of behavior would trigger an internal investigation. This incredible insider knowledge allowed him to move like a phantom through the very systems that were designed to catch men exactly like him. He would often steal the highly classified files he intended to sell late at night or during times when his office was empty, taking full and cunning advantage of the often lax internal security measures of the time to avoid detection. He was a man who was hunting for moles, while being the most dangerous mole of all, a chilling paradox that he seemed to relish. His own deep-seated paranoia about being caught drove him to impose a series of incredibly strict rules on his Soviet handlers. He insisted on minimal communication, and he repeatedly warned them to never, ever attempt to contact him directly, threatening that any deviation from his strict rules would result in the immediate and permanent termination of their relationship. This incredible level of caution and control was rare amongst spies, and it contributed greatly to his remarkable ability to operate, completely undetected, for over 2 long decades, even as the FBI and the CIA became increasingly and desperately suspicious that a high-level mole was operating somewhere deep within their ranks. The art of his shadow trade was built on a foundation of iron discipline, of incredible patience, and of a deep and chilling understanding of the very system he was so methodically betraying. The consequences of Robert Hanssen's long and calculated espionage were truly catastrophic, earning him the dark and unfortunate title of one of the most damaging spies in all of American history. Over the course of his 2-decade-long career of betrayal, he systematically leaked some of the most highly sensitive and vital information to the Soviet Union, and later, to Russia. His actions compromised critical intelligence operations and, most tragically, they jeopardized the very lives of brave individuals who were working for the United States. The extent of the damage that he caused is almost unparalleled, affecting not only the FBI, but also the CIA, the military, and the international relationships that are so crucial to national security. His betrayal was a slow, seeping poison that spread through the entire American intelligence apparatus. What was one of his most devastating and unforgivable acts? It was his exposure of the true identities of several double agents, men who were secretly working for the United States from deep within the Soviet intelligence network. These individuals, these human assets, are the most valuable and the most fragile part of any intelligence operation. They provide the critical information, the window into the enemy's plans, that can change the course of history. Among the most notable of those betrayed by Hanssen was Dmitry Polyakov, a highly valuable and high-ranking general in the GRU, the Soviet military intelligence agency. Polyakov had been providing the United States with invaluable intelligence for years, offering deep insights into Soviet military strategy and capabilities. Another was Valery Martinov, a KGB official stationed in Washington, D.C. who had also become a crucial source for the Americans. The information that Hanssen provided to his Soviet handlers led directly to the arrest, the interrogation, and the eventual execution of these men, and several others. Can you imagine the chilling effect this had? The loss of these assets was not just a strategic setback, it was a profound human tragedy. These were men who had risked their lives, and the lives of their families, to provide the United States with critical intelligence, only to be betrayed by someone from within the very agency that was sworn to protect them. This act of betrayal not only destroyed years of painstaking intelligence-gathering work but also sent a cold and terrifying message to any other potential informants, making it far more difficult for the United States to recruit new assets within the Soviet Union for years to come. The trust, once so carefully cultivated, had been shattered. Hanssen's espionage also extended far beyond the betrayal of these double agents. He leaked a vast amount of highly classified information that directly jeopardized the integrity of ongoing U.S. national security operations. He revealed the intimate details of some of the most advanced and secret surveillance systems that were being used by the FBI and the CIA to monitor Soviet activities. What was one of the most significant of these disclosures? It was the existence of a secret and incredibly expensive tunnel that the FBI had built beneath the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. This ambitious operation, which had cost millions of dollars and had taken years of effort to construct, was designed to allow the FBI to eavesdrop on the most sensitive Soviet communications. But after Hanssen's leak, the entire operation was rendered completely useless. The Soviets discovered the tunnel and took immediate measures to block any further surveillance, depriving the United States of a critical and irreplaceable intelligence tool. And the damage did not stop there. Hanssen also leaked classified information about American nuclear defense strategies, including details about missile deployments, about the nation's command and control systems, and about the secret contingency plans that were in place in the event of a nuclear war. This information gave the Soviets a much clearer and more detailed understanding of America's nuclear capabilities, reducing the United States' strategic advantage and increasing the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation during the most tense moments of the Cold War. His betrayal was not just about the past, it was about compromising the future, giving America's greatest adversary a playbook of its most vital secrets. The long-term impact of these breaches cannot be overstated. They forced the FBI and the CIA to abandon critical missions, to completely redesign their methods, and to spend immense resources to try and repair the damage, creating significant delays and resource drains that would affect their operations for years to come. The ripple effects of Robert Hanssen's quiet, methodical betrayal were felt across the entire global intelligence landscape, a deep and lasting wound inflicted by a ghost from within. By the early 1990s, the American intelligence agencies were grappling with a series of profound and deeply troubling failures. They were facing mounting and undeniable evidence that a highly placed and incredibly destructive mole, a traitor, was operating somewhere deep within their own ranks, systematically leaking some of their most sensitive and classified information to the Soviet Union, and later, to Russia. Throughout the 1980s and into the early 1990s, a devastating pattern of unexplained losses had emerged. Several high-value double agents, men who were secretly working for the United States from within the powerful Soviet intelligence network, were suddenly and inexplicably exposed, arrested, and executed. These losses raised a series of urgent and panicked alarms within the highest echelons of the FBI and the CIA, as they clearly suggested the presence of a highly placed and knowledgeable insider who was methodically and ruthlessly feeding this vital information to the enemy. In addition to these compromised double agents, a number of sensitive operations and advanced surveillance techniques were repeatedly and mysteriously neutralized, further fueling the growing suspicion that a mole was actively undermining all of their most critical efforts. Initially, the FBI and the CIA suspected that these devastating leaks were the work of Aldrich Ames, a high-ranking CIA officer who was arrested in 1994 for spying for the Soviet Union. And while Ames's capture did indeed explain some of these intelligence losses, it soon became painfully clear that another, even more elusive mole was still active. Why? Because the leaks, the unexplained failures, and the compromised operations continued even after Ames was securely imprisoned. This chilling realization led to the launch of a new and incredibly difficult internal investigation, a desperate hunt to identify the second mole who was responsible for these ongoing and catastrophic security breaches. The challenge of identifying Robert Hanssen was immense. His incredibly cautious and professional methods made him a particularly difficult and elusive target. Unlike Aldrich Ames, who had displayed erratic behavior and had lived a lavish lifestyle that was far beyond the means of his government salary, Hanssen had maintained an incredibly low profile. He had followed his own strict operational security protocols to the letter, avoiding any kind of direct contact with his handlers and insisting on complete anonymity. This, combined with his carefully cultivated public persona as a dour, devout, and deeply patriotic family man, ensured that even the most experienced investigators never suspected him. He was a ghost, hiding in plain sight, a man whose quiet and unassuming exterior perfectly concealed the dark and treacherous secrets of his double life. The hunt for the mole was a painstaking and often frustrating process. A small and highly dedicated team of FBI and CIA investigators was assembled to review every compromised case, to search for any patterns, and to identify any potential suspects. They spent years sifting through mountains of old files, re-examining every failed operation and every lost asset, hoping to find a common thread, a single individual who had access to all of the compromised information. But Hanssen, with his deep and intimate knowledge of the FBI's own internal procedures, had been incredibly careful to cover his tracks, leaving behind almost no evidence that could be traced back to him. The investigation, for a long time, seemed to be going nowhere, and a deep sense of frustration and paranoia began to permeate the American intelligence community. The ghost remained at large, and the damage continued to mount. The mole hunt had become one of the most urgent and difficult challenges in the entire history of the FBI, a desperate race against time to uncover the traitor who was operating from within their very own ranks. The hunt for the mole, for the great, unseen traitor who had been systematically dismantling American intelligence operations for years, had become one of the most frustrating and difficult investigations in the entire history of the FBI. The Special Task Force, a small and secretive group of the best investigators from both the FBI and the CIA, had been working tirelessly, sifting through mountains of old files, re-examining every compromised case, every failed operation, and every lost asset. They were searching for a pattern, for a single, common thread, but the ghost they were hunting was a master of his craft, and he had left behind almost no trail at all. Years went by, and the investigation seemed to be going nowhere. A deep and gnawing sense of paranoia had begun to permeate the American intelligence community. The mole remained at large, and the damage continued to mount. But the great turning point in this long and arduous investigation came in the year 2000, and it came not from a brilliant piece of deduction within the FBI, but from a chance opportunity on the other side of the world. A former KGB officer, a man who now found himself in a new and uncertain Russia, approached the American intelligence services with a tantalizing offer. He claimed to have access to a secret KGB archive, a file that contained intimate and detailed information about the activities of a high-level American mole. But this information, he said, would come at a very high price. After a period of intense and careful negotiation, the United States agreed to pay a significant sum of money for this mysterious package of documents, hoping, against all hope, that this might finally be the breakthrough they had been so desperately searching for. When the package finally arrived, and the investigators began to carefully examine its contents, they knew, almost immediately, that they had struck gold. The documents contained a wealth of information about the mole's long and destructive career, including details about his methods, his communications, and the vast scope of his betrayal. But hidden within this treasure trove of intelligence were two small, almost mundane items that would prove to be the traitor's ultimate undoing. The first was a simple plastic bag, the very bag that the mole had used to wrap one of his packages for a dead drop years earlier. And on the surface of this bag was a single, clear fingerprint. This was the first piece of physical evidence they had ever had. The fingerprint was carefully lifted and rushed to the FBI's forensic laboratory, where it was run through their massive database. And as the computer searched for a match, the investigators waited with a bated breath. The result, when it came, was stunning. The fingerprint was a perfect match for one of their own, a senior FBI agent named Robert Philip Hanssen. The second crucial piece of evidence was an old audio tape. On this tape was a recording of a brief conversation between the mole and his Soviet handler from years before. The FBI's audio experts went to work, carefully analyzing the voice on the tape, its pitch, its cadence, and its unique inflections. They then compared it to the voice samples they had on file for their own agents. And once again, the result was a perfect and chilling match. The voice on the tape, the voice of the man who had been selling his country's secrets for decades, was the voice of Robert Hanssen. The ghost at last had a name and a face. The revelation that Robert Hanssen, a man who had been a respected, if somewhat eccentric, counterintelligence agent for over 2 decades, was the mole sent a wave of absolute shock and disbelief through the entire intelligence community. This was a man who had cultivated an image of deep religious faith and staunch patriotism. He was a quiet family man, a regular churchgoer, a man who had often spoken of his love for his country. How could it be him? The investigators now had their man, but they knew they needed more. They needed to catch him in the very act of his betrayal. And so, the great mole hunt transformed into a new and incredibly delicate operation. They began to monitor Hanssen's every move, placing him under constant and secret surveillance. They installed hidden cameras and microphones in his office, they tracked his communications, and they followed him discreetly as he moved about his quiet, suburban life. It was a strange and difficult task, using the very techniques of counterintelligence that Hanssen himself had helped to perfect, to now hunt one of their own. The net was slowly and carefully closing in. The fatal flaw, the single forgotten fingerprint on a plastic bag and the echo of a voice on an old tape, had finally brought the ghost out of the shadows. The final act of this long and tragic story was about to begin. The ghost at last had a name. For the small, secret task force of FBI and CIA investigators who had spent years hunting this elusive traitor, the revelation that the mole was one of their own, a senior counterintelligence agent named Robert Hanssen, was a moment of both profound triumph and deep, chilling dread. They had finally found their man, but he was a part of their own family, a man they saw every day in the hallways of the bureau, a man they had trusted. Now, they had to embark on the most delicate, the most dangerous, and the most psychologically taxing phase of their entire investigation, to catch a master spy in his final act of betrayal, and to do so with such precision that the evidence would be absolute, undeniable, and ironclad. The FBI recognized the immense importance of gathering this irrefutable evidence against Hanssen to ensure a successful prosecution. To this end, they launched a carefully and brilliantly coordinated operation to catch him in the very act of espionage. Their first move was a masterpiece of bureaucratic cunning. They had to bring their target closer, to place him in an environment where they could watch his every move without him ever suspecting a thing. And so, Hanssen was reassigned to a new position within the FBI's headquarters, a move that was cleverly disguised as a promotion. He was given a new title, a new office, and a new role with a supposed focus on computer security. But in reality, his new responsibilities were carefully and completely limited, and his access to the most sensitive information was now being secretly and totally controlled. And his new office was not what it seemed. It was a carefully constructed trap. Before he ever set foot inside, hidden cameras and microphones were expertly installed, capturing his every move and his every word. The investigators watched him on their secret monitors, they listened to him on their headphones, and they began to patiently, meticulously build their case. For several long and incredibly tense months, the FBI team painstakingly compiled a mountain of evidence linking Hanssen to the years of devastating leaks. They monitored his computer usage, searching for any evidence of espionage-related communications. And teams of highly skilled surveillance agents discreetly followed him as he moved about his quiet, suburban life, paying particular and intense attention to his visits to public parks and other secluded locations where a dead drop might occur. They watched him go to church. They watched him go grocery shopping. They watched him take his children to school. It was a strange and difficult task, using the very techniques of counterintelligence that Hanssen himself had helped to perfect, to now hunt one of their own. And then, on a cold Sunday, February 18, 2001, the moment the investigators had been waiting for finally arrived. Robert Hanssen's long and destructive career of espionage was about to come to an abrupt and dramatic end. On that day, the surveillance teams watched as Hanssen left his home with his family to attend church, just as he did every Sunday. But after the service, he told his wife he needed to run a quick errand. The surveillance teams followed as he drove to Foxstone Park in Virginia, a quiet, wooded area that he had used for his dead drops in the past, a place that was now teeming with dozens of hidden FBI agents. As he walked calmly and methodically towards a small, wooden footbridge, the designated dead drop site, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The agents, hidden in the surrounding woods, their hearts pounding, watched as he placed a package, wrapped in a simple black plastic bag, at the base of the bridge. That package, they knew, contained some of the nation's most sensitive and vital secrets. And after placing the package, he made a small, prearranged chalk mark on a nearby signpost, a quiet and almost invisible signal to his Russian handlers that the drop had been made. The arrest was swift, precise, and overwhelming. As Hanssen walked away from the drop site and began to return to his car, the FBI agents moved in, surrounding him before he had any opportunity to destroy evidence or to try and escape. The great, long mole hunt was finally over. The ghost had been caught. And what was Hanssen's reaction in this final, dramatic moment, as the life he had so carefully constructed came crashing down around him? He reportedly showed little to no emotion, maintaining his quiet, dark composure even as the agents confronted him with the undeniable evidence of his long and profound betrayal. His first words, it is said, were a simple, almost detached question: "What took you so long?" His arrest sent immediate and powerful shockwaves through the entire FBI and the broader American intelligence community, as the full and devastating extent of his espionage began to finally, and tragically, come to light. The man who had hidden in plain sight for over 2 decades had made his final dead drop. The trial and the eventual sentencing of Robert Hanssen marked the dramatic and public culmination of a betrayal that had spanned over 2 long decades and had inflicted severe and lasting damage on American national security. After his arrest in February of 2001, Hanssen's case became a powerful and deeply unsettling symbol of the profound vulnerabilities that existed within America's intelligence apparatus, and of the devastating and tragic consequences of an insider threat. The legal proceedings that followed would not only bring Hanssen to justice but would also, for the first time, reveal to the public the full and shocking extent of his espionage activities and their immense and painful impact on the United States. The U.S. government acted with incredible speed to bring a series of grave charges against Hanssen, given the overwhelming and irrefutable evidence they had gathered of his long-running espionage activities. He was ultimately charged with 15 counts of espionage and conspiracy, with each of these charges carrying the potential for the death penalty. These charges meticulously outlined the critical and sensitive nature of the information that Hanssen had provided to his foreign intelligence handlers, including the true identities of American informants, the intimate details of advanced surveillance methods, and vital national defense strategies. In their case against him, the prosecutors emphasized the immense gravity of his actions, describing them as nothing less than treasonous and as among the most damaging in all of American intelligence history. The government argued, with devastating clarity, that Hanssen's betrayal had not only compromised critical operations but had directly resulted in the deaths of the American operatives he had exposed. During his first court appearances, Hanssen remained remarkably composed and unemotional. He initially pleaded not guilty. But the mountain of evidence that the FBI had so painstakingly compiled against him, including the crucial documents from the KGB archive, his own fingerprints, and the extensive surveillance footage of him at the dead drop sites, made a conviction seem absolutely inevitable. And so, facing the very real possibility of execution, Hanssen and his legal team made a fateful decision. He chose to cooperate with the investigators in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He agreed to plead guilty to all the charges and, in return for a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, he would provide a full and detailed account of his long and secret career as a spy. Why would the government agree to such a deal? His cooperation was absolutely critical for the FBI and the CIA, as it allowed them, for the very first time, to fully assess the complete extent of the damage that had been caused by his long and sustained espionage. In addition to formally confessing to all of his crimes, Hanssen provided the investigators with detailed information about the specific documents he had leaked, the operations he had compromised, and the methods he had used. He offered them a rare and chilling glimpse into the mindset of a master mole, a man who had successfully navigated the shadows for over 20 years. On May 10, 2002, Robert Hanssen was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge in the case described his actions as both shocking and appalling, noting the irreparable harm he had caused to both U.S. intelligence and to the nation's security. The sentence ensured that Hanssen would spend the rest of his life behind bars, unable to inflict any further harm on the United States. He was incarcerated at the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, one of the most secure facilities in the entire country, a place known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. His life in prison would be one of profound isolation and monotony, a quiet and stark end to a life that had been defined by such great and destructive secrets. Hanssen's sentencing brought a sense of closure to the FBI and to the broader intelligence community, but it also underscored the urgent and profound need for significant and lasting reforms to prevent any similar breaches from ever happening again. The case became a defining moment in the history of U.S. intelligence, serving as both a powerful and sobering cautionary tale and as a crucial catalyst for change. The trial and the sentencing had provided a public opportunity to assess the full scope of the damage that Hanssen had caused, and it was truly unparalleled in its scale and its impact. The lives that had been lost, the careers that had been ruined, and the critical operations that had been compromised as a direct result of his actions demonstrated the far-reaching and devastating consequences of espionage, and the immense power of a single, trusted individual to betray their nation. Robert Hanssen's two-decade-long career of espionage profoundly and permanently shaped the U.S. intelligence community, leaving behind a complex and lasting legacy that is marked by betrayal, by reform, and by a new and sober reflection on the nature of trust itself. While his actions caused truly irreparable damage to national security and to the credibility of the FBI, they also served as a critical and powerful catalyst for change, driving immense and necessary improvements in counterintelligence practices, in internal security protocols, and in the very cultural mindset of the intelligence professionals who are tasked with protecting the nation's secrets. The painful lessons that were learned from the Hanssen betrayal continue to influence intelligence operations to this very day, ensuring that his treachery, as devastating as it was, would not be repeated. What were the most important of these lessons? Hanssen's actions exposed significant and dangerous vulnerabilities within the FBI and the broader intelligence community, prompting a complete and urgent re-evaluation of all counterintelligence strategies. His ability to operate, completely undetected, for over 20 long years highlighted the immense and often underestimated challenges of identifying insider threats within trusted and secure institutions. His case powerfully underscored the need for more robust and sophisticated systems to monitor employee behavior, their financial activities, and their access to classified information. In the wake of his arrest, the FBI and other agencies implemented comprehensive new insider threat programs that combined behavioral analysis, automated monitoring systems, and human intelligence to identify potential risks. This holistic approach was designed to detect suspicious activity before it could escalate into a full-blown security breach. Hanssen's betrayal also revealed deep weaknesses in the FBI's hiring and vetting processes, as well as a lack of sufficient oversight for employees who were in highly sensitive positions. The agencies have since adopted much stricter background checks, ongoing financial monitoring, and regular polygraph examinations for all personnel who have access to classified materials. These measures are designed to identify personal vulnerabilities, such as financial stress or deep-seated personal grievances, that could make an individual susceptible to recruitment by foreign intelligence agencies. And the Hanssen case, above all, emphasized that even the most trusted and seemingly patriotic individuals can pose a profound threat to national security. This chilling realization has fostered a new culture of vigilance within the intelligence agencies, with a greatly increased focus on accountability and on transparency. Beyond these procedural changes, Hanssen's betrayal also prompted a significant cultural shift within the FBI and other intelligence agencies. The case had exposed a lack of accountability within the Bureau, where senior officials with significant authority had often operated with a minimum of oversight. In response, the agency introduced new measures to ensure that employees in these sensitive positions are now subject to regular and rigorous reviews and audits. And recognizing that Hanssen's motivations included not only greed but also a deep sense of personal dissatisfaction, the FBI and other agencies have since established new programs to support their employees' mental health and financial stability. Counseling services, financial planning resources, and anonymous reporting systems now allow employees to address their personal challenges without the fear of stigma or career repercussions. The Hanssen case also underscored the urgent need for advanced technological solutions to protect classified information. He had exploited outdated and often lax security systems to access and to leak his information. In response, the FBI and other agencies have invested heavily in new cybersecurity technologies to safeguard their sensitive data. Encrypted communication channels, biometric access controls, and new automated monitoring systems now play a central role in protecting classified systems from any kind of unauthorized access. And finally, Hanssen's case remains a powerful and sobering example of the dangers that are posed by insider threats and the complex measures that are needed to mitigate them. By understanding the motivations that drive individuals like Hanssen to commit espionage, the dangerous combination of greed, arrogance, and personal dissatisfaction, intelligence agencies can develop more effective strategies for prevention. His case is now frequently cited in training programs as a powerful example of the devastating impact of insider threats. And while the immense damage caused by his betrayal can never be undone, the lessons learned from his case have undoubtedly made the American intelligence community stronger, more vigilant, and better prepared to face the complex challenges of the modern world. And so, our long and quiet story of this great intelligence disaster comes to its end. It is a cautionary tale, a story of how a single individual's quiet betrayal can have loud and devastating consequences. It is a story of how even the most trusted institutions can have hidden vulnerabilities, and it is a story of the profound and often painful lessons that must be learned in the silent, shadowy world of espionage. Now, let the echoes of this complex and difficult story fade into the quiet of the night. It is time for history to rest, and it is time for you to rest as well. Good night, and have peaceful dreams.